Mike, I'm really glad to have you on the show. I'm excited about the books you've written, the work that you're doing, the presentations where you do keynotes and other things. But why don't you take a moment and, from your perspective, introduce yourself to the audience, and then we'll dive in.
I'd be honored. And Dave, thanks for having me on your show. I really do appreciate this. So I am an author today, a small business author. Historically, and still today, I own businesses. But I found that one of the most cathartic ways and effective ways to address my entrepreneurial woes and mistakes is to write about it and then find the solution. So I've written 10 business books now, and every book I write is something I'm looking to learn. I wrote a book called Profit First to learn how to be sustainably profitable. My new book, All In, is about leadership. Admittedly, a meh leader at best, and I really aspire to be a great leader. So I write books that teaches that because I'm in the learning process. I interview now countless entrepreneurs, learn their stories, build a methodology, put into a book, deploy it in my own businesses first. I own about 17 companies now, and we deploy in all these different businesses. And then once we have something that's working, then I codify it in the final book and make it out available for the public.
It's interesting. It's like thinking of Atomic Habits. I mean, he really built that on doing a bunch of research,
Yes.
more than what he was doing or his experience. At least that's my understanding. And brilliant book, and built upon Charles Duhigg's work, The Power Habit,
That's
which
right.
was so great.
Oh
Once
my God.
again, research based.
Mhm.
But I love the way you're then taking it and bringing it into real life. So with the entrepreneurs that you talk with, interview, that's one stage. But then you've got your 17 companies. And I
Right.
don't know whether you do any coaching. Do any coaching with
Well,
17
I
companies?
own
You
some
wouldn't have
coaching
any time.
businesses. Yeah, I own coaching businesses. I don't coach myself
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, necessarily. Occasionally I'll do, but it's interesting. It's in those deployments, to your point, where the greatest learning happens. So I consider myself not a creator as much as a curator. Collect ideas, codify it in a certain way, and then to try to deploy it. And what I find in many cases, originally, it's too complex, too, I don't know if sophisticated is the right word, but there's too many moving parts, and it's very hard to deploy. So in that stage, where with my businesses, and ultimately a secondary set of clients, I learn how to really boil it down to the essence, the core functional stuff. Um, I think it's Occam's razor, the concept of the simpler it is, the more effective it is.
Oh,
And
yeah,
that's what
yeah.
we try to do.
Yeah, interesting. It's very consistent with something I've come up with in the last couple of years. I call a 3T training process. So you teach the transfer of knowledge, you test, which is what you're doing. You test to then kind of make certain the person can apply what you taught them. And then you train or mentor on an ongoing basis until you master it, till the
Mhm.
person masters it. And that's what I'm hearing you say is you're doing the same thing through these 17 businesses, and then you bring it out and you're like, hey, look what we found. We proved this. We're in the back kitchen here. We got this great recipe, and this is going to taste great. Just try this dish.
Yeah, right. I love to study comedians. I do some public speaking, and I think they're the best orators because there's no PowerPoints, there's nothing to lean on. It's just your next joke. What I discovered in this process of studying comedians is many of them, to your point, David, will go to these smaller venues and they'll try things out, and what joke lands and what doesn't land. So they have a theory of what will work, but most of it doesn't. And some of the stuff that lands, I've heard in these interviews with the comedians, they said, I didn't even think it was that funny, but it crushes with the audience. It's then the Netflix special that has the best of the prior, 50 or 100 tests that they run. And
Yeah,
so I was like,
yeah.
oh, that's a really good observation. That's what we need to do in our business is test to get to the essence.
Yeah. So it's funny you bring up comedians. I hadn't thought of it that way. But my brother was best friends with Robin Williams in junior and
Oh,
senior year of high
wow.
school, and they stayed friends. And one of the reasons they stayed friends is Phil didn't ask Robin for anything. They just
Yeah.
get together, they go for a run or they do whatever. They were just buddies.
Yeah.
And but I remember him saying two things. One is he said, yeah, Robin's testing some new material. He's down at the comedy, whatever it is in San Francisco.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're gonna go check it out and be there. And the other thing he said was that um, they went to college together at College of Marin, which had a great theater program.
Mm.
and they did theater together, which was fun. But he lived with Robin for a short time, but it wasn't very long. It was like less than a year, I think. And I didn't think, I asked him why, but he said, I just couldn't handle it, because he would come home and he'd be testing this material on me, or
Constantly.
he'd be just hyped up, because Robin was either super hyped up or just quiet,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
and just thinking. And he was a wonderful human being, just a wonderful, wonderful guy.
As a
So,
fan, that's the perception that you get, and also is watching him, he seemed to have this hyper energy that was untouchable when he was performing at times. And then
oh
you'd
yeah,
see the other side too through stories, from people in that space.
yeah,
And I think in business, if I can just kind of translate this back to business, is the final, once you kind of nailed this stuff, that's the hyper amazing performance. I find of all the research I do, it's usually about 1% to 2% of the stuff I've collected that has the 99% impact. And the rest of the stuff is interesting, but not of service.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think I would agree. I would agree. There's certain overarching
Mm.
strategies or systems. I had to learn how to be systematic. And but then I've learned that there's also these little disciplines or mini systems, little things like what I call sanctuary time, where I got to start each day, where I got to check in and hold myself accountable. Did I do what I wanted to do yesterday? And okay, what's the new information? What are my standards? What's my plan for today?
Yeah,
And no, I fully agree. So talk to me about All In. I love All In,
sure.
because All In speaks of excellence. It speaks I love the way you use the term community.
Thank
That
you.
your company is a community versus a family, which I don't like. Okay,
Yeah.
because although there are toxic family members that you have to fire, in general you don't fire a family member.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
I do like team. I do like team, but it's used a lot.
It's yeah,
But I
yeah,
liked
yeah.
community. Why did you choose community?
I choose community over culture because while I like that term, I think has become bastardized, at least in my understanding of it. So culture, at least how it was defined to me and how I executed on it, was I have a set of values. And as I build my organization, I'm going to recruit people that resonate with my values, that we have shared values. What I didn't appreciate what I was doing was finding people that were like me. And it caused a tunnel vision component, that we would all say the same things. We became a group of yes people. Yes, yes, yes. And just replicating. Community to me is more like, the town you live in and the town I live in, that it's a diverse set of people that are sharing a common location, but we don't necessarily share the same values, but strength comes out of that. So I'll give you one extreme example. In my own business, we had a retreat. I called my colleagues together. This is about 5 years ago. And we started talking about values. And I said, one of the most important values that I hold, and I think is important for this company, is no dicks allowed. And what I mean by this is, I don't want to deal with someone that takes advantage of our company, is rude, but I'm not going to be that person either. That behavior is not permitted. And my colleague raised her hand and said, that's kind of broy, Mike, like no dicks. Like, that's a broy phrase. She goes, that's not who I am. I understand what you're saying, but it's not who I am. And Jenna went on to explain her perspective, and other people did. I was like, oh my gosh, we have a communal value set that is not representative of any individual. And that became transformative for our organization, putting equal significance in everyone and in encouraging diversity of backgrounds, of feelings, of emotions, and that our strength comes out of that. It's a much more rounded way to look. And that's why I chose that term. And the behavior is to embrace all on an equal pedestal and intentionally seek diversity.
Yeah, and it may be the vernacular you're using, the words you're using.
Sure.
So I really like community, but I believe one of the biggest things that we have to have in a community is a core set of values, limited, okay, that we can agree on. Otherwise, the community can't exist, because then everybody's out for one another,
Right.
out for themselves.
Right. It's anarchy.
Yeah, anarchy. So whereas your phrase may have seemed coarse to her, did you come up with another version of the phrase?
We did.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what did
So
it work out to be?
it came out to be the Ted Lasso. So I don't know if you ever saw that show. there's a show that had a great run, I think on Netflix or something. And it was about this sports coach who was the eternal optimist, no matter how defeated his team was. And the optimism and the encouragement supported the team. And this phrase of being the Ted Lasso came about and was much more representative of us communally. So maybe I'm arguing two sides of the same coin, but culture historically has been taught of set these value parameters and filter based upon that. Community is observe what the growing value set is and adjust accordingly. It's like amendments to the Constitution. Like there are going to be changes over time communally, and embrace that as opposed to staying rigid with one set for eternity.
Yeah, and once again, it may be verbiage, and I think we're probably in agreement, but I think you do need to have a set of core values, and they can adapt. They can adapt.
Exactly.
And I love the way you went with Ted Lasso, because I love the values that have some fun in them. You brought up comedians earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, they have some fun, but they're also making a very clear point.
Totally. Yeah. So, we could have the obligatory on the wall optimism, integrity, encouragement. That's who we are.
Oh, yeah.
But it didn't resonate. We talked, it was our core team. There was about 12 of us there, and we were talking, and everyone's sharing their own opinions. And we came to this, we all love this character who represents all of us, are part of us as individuals. And that became this new core value, if you will, for the organization. So yeah, so that was powerful for us.
No, I think that's great. Let me shift gears. So you talk about 4 things, if you were to summarize, at least, in one of the things that I looked at about your all-in book, which sounds like a great read. I recommend it to people. I wasn't able to read it in depth, but I did scan through some things.
Oh, thank you.
You talk about recruit the right talent.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that. So recruiting, I've heard Jim Collins say, get the right people in the seats.
Yeah, right people in the right seats. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But what's your spin?
Yeah. So I think what most organizations, and when I say most, this is how I was running my organization and now observed in others, match talent to title. I need to hire a fill in the blank receptionist. What is a requirement as a receptionist? Greet customers that walk in the door if you have that kind of model. Answer the phones, but also there's downtime, light data entry. It's rare that someone will excel in all of those components. I actually had a receptionist who was amazing at greeting customers and that socialization component, horrible at the meticulous data entry component. And therefore, her name was Petra. Petra didn't qualify. And I thought, oh my God, I have to let her go. It's too bad she's not a good receptionist. But the reality is she's a great social person. We had a position in sales where we needed that farmer role, someone that maintained relationships. And the epiphany was, oh, Petra, would you also want to do some of our sales components, maintain relationships? She lit up and said, I love that. And by the way, you get to ditch the data entry. Thank God, who we gave to someone else. The lesson was this: don't match talent to titles, match talent to tasks. So instead of having this kind of pyramid structure where we're trying to insert people in the different layers, it became this morphic web-like structure where we had, instead of 10 titles with people doing 10 different things within each title, we had 100 tasks and said, who's ideal for each one of these tasks? And it got rid of that title mentality. That's been a very powerful way to allow people to express themselves in a way that gives them joy, which means inevitably they're going to be rock stars at it.
Yeah, but it sounds like also as part of your process, when you hired her, of course, this was after you hired her.
This was after,
and she was a member of the team. But when you hired her, you confirmed, and I'm not trying to hammer you on this, by the way, but you confirmed she was a culture match, or she was a community match, to use your term. She was a community match. She was going to fit with your community, get along well with people. And then it later came up, well, wait a minute, we got her in the wrong role, but you were wise enough to say, but she's a superstar.
Yeah.
So where else she can apply those superpowers?
That's right. And I'll add to that. She was a rock star or a player, whatever the terms are. I've concluded, the collective, they say that 10% of the world are A players. And I confront that. I believe 100% of the world are A players when put in the right position. Everyone is amazing at what they love to do, whatever that may be. So for my small organization, maybe they're not going to be a rock star for me because I don't have those opportunities, but they're a rock
Yeah.
star somewhere.
Yeah.
So I go in with this mentality, everyone's a rock star. The other thing I did with, not with Petra, but subsequent to this, was realizing that pre-onboarding process, when I'm doing the interviews and so forth, there's certain things I could do. And I learned this from the sports industry. This became one of the most profound realizations for me. I used to hire people on experiential talent, meaning what's the resume say? What you did in the past is indicative of your future. Therefore, strong resume, strong future. And I realized with experience that, first of all, that may not be truthful experience. So there's something there. Secondly, what the experience they bring to the table may not be the exact experience I need. I actually may have to untrain them to retrain them in our methodology, in our way. And that becomes more burdensome. And people generally dictate much more of a premium when they come in with experience. And so it can be very costly and hard to find these people. So I was like, well, how can I get people that have the most potential? And I'd argue that potential is the most underrated, but most important ability or talent that people have. If you could be a rock star, where would it be? So the question then came, how do you find people who can develop into being extraordinary people? If you could forecast this, wouldn't that be amazing? And I didn't think any businesses were doing it until I looked at the sports industry. I played sports in college, in high school, and I remember in high school, it was lacrosse was my sport. And admittedly, I was an average athlete at best, but I went to a lacrosse camp. And what they did at this camp is in Hobart, New York, an elite Division III school. They had 500 students there. The coaches were coaching all the students to get better, but then tapping certain athletes on the shoulder saying, hey, you're really good at this component. We'd like to bring you to another field to show you more skills, to play against more advanced players. And they would tap some of those kids on the shoulder to go to the highest level. What they were doing was they were educating everyone, but they were then recruiting talent. They were identifying who has the most potential. And they recruited, I think, 3 players for Hobart. Was not one of them. I did go on to play collegiate lacrosse in Virginia as a result. Well, we can deploy this same approach in business. And my favorite example is Home Depot. Home Depot runs this build a birdhouse workshop. I don't know if you've ever gone to one of those things, but you head down to the Home Depot and they show you how to assemble a birdhouse. What the perception is, it's an educational event where they're going to ingratiate you with the store. You're going to have a good, positive experience. That's what we think they're selling. It is a recruiting platform. What they do is they observe the participants and they look for 3 stages of potential. First stage is curiosity. People show up are interested in the first place. They vetted themselves out from 99.9% of the world because they at least are interested. Next level is desire. Questions, intrigue, supporting others are indications of desire. The highest level is thirst. I can't quit this. I can't stop it. The weirdo who goes to build a birdhouse workshop every weekend is thirst. What Home Depot does is they have an employee there observing those levels of participation, and they will tap on the shoulder, just like the Hobart lacrosse camp, and say, hey, you're showing all of the potential elements to be a great Home Depot employee. Have you ever considered working here? We'd love to give you an application. What we can do as employers, and we do in our own organization now, is instead of recruiting, instead of running ads online, we simply say, hey, we need to hire a bookkeeper. We'll put an ad out saying, hey, we have a bookkeeping workshop. Ever interested in becoming a bookkeeper? Or if we need someone that's advanced, we'll say, are you currently a bookkeeper but looking to advance your skills? That's the class we're putting on. I don't have bookkeeping skills, but we'll hire someone to teach it. We're running a birdhouse workshop. People come in, they even will pay to show up. We're educating them, but in the process, we're observing the participation level. And we'll cherry pick people out of those classes and say, wow, you're showing such talent here. You know, we have a position for this. They didn't know they were actually interviewing for a job, but that doesn't matter because everyone is getting better. Everyone's learning something, and we have the opportunity then to pick the person who's the best fit for us.
I love it as a great idea for scouting, for recruiting. And it reminds me when I coached youth soccer, which I did for like 15 years.
Oh, amazing.
Long time, and ref for 8. But I finally realized it at the end of my tenure, because I'm a slow study, that what I took my team. So my team went up again. We were under 14. We went up against a championship team that had won 65 games and tied 2. Okay. And we were podunk. Okay. So what I did was I told but we were a reasonably good team. So I told my team, what I did with my team was I pulled each player aside And I said, I want you to do this one thing in the game. So it's kind of like the pulling people out of the lacrosse camp. Try this one thing, and then you watch and see whether they can do it.
Yes.
And we took that team down to the final minute.
Wow.
And one of their players went in the left-hand corner against our goal and arced a shot in the upper V of the
Oh my God, that's
goal,
like pro level.
opposite side. Yeah, it was
Oh
it
my
was it
God.
was a perfect shot. But what could I say? I said, you guys were awesome. But what I did was I did that by focusing on one thing, and it made a change. But I love what you're saying about this. And it also speaks to what I was going to ask you next. And maybe you just explained it, but where you talk about how do you transform struggling employees into superstars? So
Yeah,
that's a struggle for everybody. And one
it is.
method you gave was maybe you got them in the wrong seat. That's
Correct.
great. But I think maybe you've got some more tips for
I
our
do.
audience here.
One of the techniques is to give them ownership, but not actual legal ownership. I'm not talking ESOP here. That could be a strategy. I actually, in my research, found that many ESOPs are poorly executed and results more in entitlement than engagement. Now I own a piece of the business, you owe me type of thing. So how do you give people ownership without giving them legal ownership? And the best analogy that I can share is with cars. A rental car versus a car in your driveway. I recently, literally last week, was renting a car. And what I noticed is they give me a set of rules I must comply with. And what happens is when we're forced to comply with something and there's punitive consequences, we will seek to defy in other ways. So the short version of this is when we're forced to comply, we seek to defy. They told me return the car with a full tank of gas, or you'll be penalized with this atrocious fee for filling your gas tank. There will be no scratches or dents, of course. It better not be dirty. The interior must be clean, or there'll be these penalties. So what do I do? The second I pull out of that, I call it the DMZ, with the lights going off and the lights and the spikes coming in. Once you finally get out, what do? I'm trying to pull donuts in the parking lot. I want to see how fast this thing can launch off when the light turns green. And it was a Prius I was driving, and it's kind of a quick car. But when we're forced to comply, we seek to defy. The way we treat a rental car is far different than the car in our driveway. Now, I own a pickup truck, and I take much more care of it. I definitely don't do donuts with it. I will wash it and wax it every so often. I care for it. So the question is why? Now, here's the most interesting thing. That car in my driveway, I don't own. The bank owns it. I'm making my installment. So I don't have legal ownership, but I've achieved this thing called psychological ownership. The lesson here is if we can invoke psychological, the sense of the feeling of ownership with our colleagues, they will naturally perform at the highest levels. Just like we do. If you're a business owner, you naturally perform much better for your own business than if you work somewhere else because you own it. So how do you do it? There was research in the 1980s by a guy named John Pierce. He coined the term psychological ownership, and he said that there's 3 elements that trigger it. The first element is control, meaning I have authority over where I take it, when I take it. I can decide to fill it up with gas or not. So the more authority or control I have over something, the more I feel I possess it. The second component is the ability to personalize. He calls it investing in yourself, but personalization. I put a bumper sticker on it or a window sticker. I get to program the radio stations in my car. I don't program the radio stations in a rental car. I definitely can't put a sticker on it. So the fact that I have the ability to personalize it to my own tastes gives me a great sense of ownership. And the last part is intimate knowledge. When I bought my pickup truck, I remember I drove it home and I sat in the driveway in the middle of a freezing cold winter day, shivering to death, reading page by page through the entire manual to see what every bell and whistle was. Rental cars, I don't even know if they have an owner's manual. I'm definitely not going to look at it. With our colleagues, we need to invoke psychological ownership. Give them control over their role, the ability to ideate, the ways they want to navigate their job. Give them authority to determine their own path to get to the agreed upon goal, but to navigate their path there. Allow them to personalize it. How can they make it more of their own? And the last part is training and knowledge. The more knowledge we have of something, the more we feel we possess it. The last thing I want to share is there is one risk as you give people psychological ownership is fiefdoms. And a fiefdom is where I know so much, I have so much authority that I'm going to block and tackle anyone from this. And, when I go on vacation, the business is going to be struggling, or God forbid I leave, the business is going to struggle because all the knowledge goes with me. The highest level of ownership in an organization is called collective psychological ownership. It's where multiple people feel they possess something. My wife, I have 3 kids. We have a dog. We all feel as quote unquote owners of the dog. The dog is a family member. Because we all care for our dog. We all have control. We all have the ability to personalize our dog. We have nicknames for our dog, and we have special collars and stuff like that. And we have intimate knowledge. We know, my wife in particular knows exactly when the dog needs to go to the bathroom or has any needs because we know it so intimately. Those elements collectively, we all feel ownership over the dog at such a high level that the dog is a family member and cared for as an equal. We can do the same thing with our colleagues using these techniques.
I like the techniques, and it's probably my fault because of the way I jumped into the question, but it seems like in All In, and I didn't read every page, but my experience is that you have to have that community defined, what the community kind of stands for. You have to connect with each individual player on your team. What is meaningful work for you?
Yes.
Yeah. So the meaningful work then plays right into the different things you just said. And then on the leadership side, which you've got a lot of great stuff on leadership, is you have to have a system that I say there's 4 management disciplines: how you hire, manage, develop, and retain people. You've got to have some really good systems where there's some boundaries. Henry Cloud, John Townsend type of thing where, okay, you can play within this realm and do those 3 things you said, and then it's super powerful. Like you said, I can see how that becomes a superstar or superpower. That's amazing if you've got those structural things in place first, and the connection with the meaningful work.
Yeah, we have a technique here where we will discuss, I'll meet with a colleague or something, and we'll agree upon an outcome as opposed to the path. Now, we do have best practices. So an example with accounting, Jackie was one of our colleagues for a while, and I said, why is it important that we invoice the way we do? And we discussed it, and she said, you know what, at the end of the day, it's timely and it's accurate. And those are important components because timeliness means we're caring for our own cash flow, and accuracy makes sure that we're caring for our clients and it's representative of the work we did. It's the ultimate degree of fairness. I said, okay, we've agreed to the outcome, timely and accurate. Now I said, we have a best practice, we have a routine and so forth. Here is the best practice. And when you see opportunities for improvement, this is the assignment of control, improve it. Just do it. As long as we achieve this outcome at the highest levels that you can help us get there. And Jackie came up with some innovative ideas in our billing practices that made timeliness and accuracy more prevalent far more prevalent in the work we're doing. Now, Jackie was with us 15 years ago. We continue those practices today. Here's the funny thing. In the old version of me, I would say, here's our best practice. Just duplicate this, just copy this. And what happens is our business becomes a laggard because we're not improving. It's just how much can you replicate or clone what's already happening? So to your point, we need to have controls and structure. I think we also need to invite and encourage our colleagues to modify and improve those things when they see it fit, because that will give them a sense of greater control and it'll bring about better practices to our business overall.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. And here's another story for you on the ownership piece. So I went to work for a company called Knowledge Point. They were owned by CCH, a big legal publisher in Chicago. And so we then had to submit our expense reports to this guy in this 4,000 person company in Chicago. And I was warned, this guy's a total Nazi. You won't like this. He doesn't pay you, blah, blah, blah. So I just studied how he wanted things set up. I can be slightly OCD. And I submitted my expense reports according to the way he wanted. I got paid direct deposit within 2 days. Every time, never a flaw. And then I heard the story of why. What happened was this guy was in charge of paying, and this is where it relates to what you're talking about with the ownership piece, is that he was working, doing expense reports, and he came to his boss, said, I want to quit. The boss said, well, why? He said, well, no one pays any attention to me. I have no authority to enforce the rules
Mhm.
that you're telling me to abide by. So I'm sorry, I can't do this. And the boss said, oh, I don't know how the conversation
Yeah.
went, but the bottom line was, you got authority. I'm behind you. And from
Yeah.
that day, he became the expense report Nazi. And
Yeah.
that's not a nice way to put it,
Yeah.
but the enforcer. And he was that way. But then they got all their expense reports the way they needed them.
Mm.
And they had everything to back up if they ever got audited. And this guy loved his job, whatever. He was just wired that way. He
Yeah.
loved going through everything. And that's really speaks to your ownership piece. So I can hear what you're saying. It makes perfect sense.
There can be, and it doesn't sound like it played out here, but sometimes there's a retaliatory component where I remember, I remember once at a business where we took in a lot of deliveries. And so there was a regular UPS guy,
Yeah.
and he came in once and he was just in a hot mess. And we're like, what's going on? He's like, the rules that they're putting upon me, forced to comply. He's like, it's payback time to UPS. And he's like, wasn't his words, but this was the conjecture. Sometimes boxes get dropped and get kicked around. What was interesting though is he didn't do that to us. Like he was retaliating against UPS, but he would care for us. Our receptionist, same woman, Petra, said, "Hey, we're so dependent upon UPS. Why don't we had a spare office. Why don't we have a break room only for our UPS guy? He can come in." She found out what his favorite, he loves sports. She would get sports channel going. This is pre-streaming, so you had to record on a VHS. She would record it, have it playing there, hot cup of coffee and donuts or whatever, sometimes a different treat. He would come in and we said, we got a break room for you. And he's like, listen, I got 5 minutes. He goes, it's the best 5 minutes of every single day for me. Coming here, catching up on Sports Center and doing this. He's like, you'll never miss a package. I don't care what's going on. You'll always get delivered. We had a big job. This was back, we were doing tech installs,
Yeah.
computer technology. And we had a big job coming and a nor'eastern was tearing through. And we're like, we're not getting our inventory on time. And all of a sudden, through the storm, 2 lights in the distance. It was like you're in some movie and you see this UPS truck kind of skidding and peeling its way in. And here comes our guy delivering all the stuff. He's like, you're my only delivery today. And you got it. It's the essence of human reciprocity. When you care for someone genuinely, and it wasn't manipulative. This was just genuine care for this guy.
Exactly. Yeah.
He reciprocates it. When his company was instilling, we want more from you, you better do this, enforcing compliance, it became retaliatory. Embracing people inevitably is a better way, in my experience, of managing consistent high-end results than forcing and demanding from people.
No, and really, it comes back to people want to know that you value them.
You're right. Right.
So I mean, yeah. So if you've got a job and it's a good job and people are reasonably okay, but you don't feel that they like you or they value you, then you're like, I got to go find something else. I mean, it's so important. So that's great. So if you were to say one more thing about your book, what's like the one big concept you feel that we haven't touched on?
I'll give you what I feel is the most contrarian and therefore the most profound. I'll share a little story around it to set the stage. I had my second business and I worked one day and I saw, oh my gosh, we can achieve $10 million in revenue. I was bootstrapping this company. I've never achieved that up to that point. So I'm like, this is a big deal. And in the process, we can take down our biggest competitor. And I had 30 colleagues at the time, brick and mortar. I called everyone together in our meeting room and said, I got big news. And I did this big flare. I ripped off a sticky note off the board and behind it revealed $10 million. I said, this is the year we're achieving it. I set a corporate goal. And there was crickets in response. I'm like, what's going on here? We're going to do this. Let's get excited. My assistant, Patty, came up to me and said, Mike, I want you to know that's your vision. You get the bigger house and the new car. What about our visions for ourselves? One person was looking to buy a house for the first time. Another person was fighting a terminal disease. She's like, everyone has their own vision. And that became the epiphany. And this is kind of the core of this book is good leaders set a corporate vision. Great leaders set a collective vision. They understand what the business is looking to do, which honestly is a representation of the leadership's intentions or shareholders or whatever. But every individual within the organization is looking to achieve something, a life outcome. The job may be a vehicle for there, but it may be a means to the end. It isn't necessarily the end. And therefore, great leaders embrace and understand what everyone in their company is looking to achieve, or at least everyone under their guidance. And then we say, how do we achieve all of these visions? So right outside my office here, this location, we're small. We have 20 employees or so, but this location, we have only 8 of us here at this office. And right outside my door, we have everyone's individual vision. Now, my vision in part is what we're looking to achieve with this business. But I also know someone's looking to move to a new country and set up their life there. Another person is actually looking to learn to play guitar. And what my job is this is not Make-A-Wish Foundation. I'm not here to buy you that guitar or send you to a new country. My job is to make sure that's at the forefront of our conversations. How are you making out on that? How's the job fulfilling that? Is there any blocking and tackling or flexibility we can offer to achieve that? And to our earlier discussion of reciprocity, the more I care for everyone's individual vision, the more they care for me as the leader, in this case, my vision, which is therefore the corporate vision. And it becomes a much stronger organization. Don't put an X on the map and try to march there. Instead, lock arms and achieve all the X's on that map.
So I totally believe in this. Have you ever seen the book, The Dream Manager?
Yeah, Matthew Kelly's book. Yes.
Yeah,
excellent.
yeah. So, and what you're saying is very consistent with that. And I think that this is really, I can't think of the right analogy, but I totally agree with you. And it is what most leaders do not do.
Correct.
Too busy, don't care. Oh, I don't want to get into your personal stuff. Now the Dream Manager, the analogy was a janitorial company. How do we keep people? We got high turnover. And so they set up a program where they would offer an optional advisor to help people talk about their goals, set their goals. And so it worked out very, very successfully. What I've found, similar to what you've done, is I encourage people, like, if you want to talk about your personal goals, you want to pay off your college debt, you want to buy a house, you want to travel somewhere, you want to learn guitar. So let's talk about those. And in our company, we do classes on here's how you set and achieve goals. Here's how you go after them day by day. And the big one, Mike, I don't know whether you've done this. I have my own finance class I teach.
I love that.
With some basics, because the majority of your employees, even though there are great people out there, Dave Ramsey or whoever you like, who teach very solid practices, the majority of them either are not aware of it, have read it and tossed it out. Okay. So they did the first T in the 3G process, but the test never happened. And yet they would like to, but they have these habits and they have these marketing messages all the time saying you have to spend your money here to be fulfilled. Right. And so we try to teach them, train them, and help them learn the skills where they can pursue that. And look at another thing that you'll probably agree with. I don't know. I'm curious whether you've done this. Is we'll say, okay, like I've got one employee now, she loves to travel. I'm like, okay, well, look, you have flexible time. You want to work on a day that's a holiday or you want to work extra hours, let's just keep track of it. And then you can take extra time beyond your PTO. I don't care. I totally trust her. She's phenomenal. I'd say her name, but I don't want anybody to call and hire. And so, but
I was hoping you would.
Yeah. But she's great. And that's what she does. But you also could offer, okay, well, if you do this extra work, I could give you some extra money and maybe that'll help you get to where you pay for your guitar lessons. Yeah. Or you put it in the bank towards the house or whatever. But what are your thoughts on that? Because we've only got a few minutes and we're going to wrap up on time.
Yeah, I think those are genius things in regards to the individual visions or dreams people have. What I found most interesting is the collective support. My colleagues are championing each other and excited when someone comes in and plays the first chord on the guitar. Like people are emotionally engaged and there's this elevation. So it brings about a very strong team. In regards to financial acuity, I do talk about that in All In. It's translated from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Foundationally, he says we have physiological needs, breathing air, drinking water. But the next need is financial security. Now, I think most leaders translate that into I have to pay more, and that's not what it is. I need to understand how to manage my money is what it is. So the education gives people financial security.
Yeah.
We don't do the education component, but now you got me thinking. We bring in a wealth manager where you don't have to already have wealth. He shows you how to achieve wealth. So he works with people individually. And what I was surprised by is we have some folks here that are, midlifers, meaning between 40 and 60, who don't have wills. And that's part of security. So he came in and said, here's how you do it. And we helped everyone. And we actually, did more than that, but we helped everyone get wills in place. And there's a sense of more security and safety, which then translates back to home, back to the office. And the last thought is, for example, at home, if I'm struggling in some way, it's not that I can cut that off and not bring it to work. So as business owners, we need to extend beyond just the business interface. We should appropriately and with consideration, but we should be involved in the personal life as much as the employee wants to invite us in to support that component, because healthy at home, healthy at work. And so I think we can influence that component.
I totally agree. So, Mike, we've got all in how great leaders build unstoppable teams. Any closing comments or direction you want to give our audience?
Well, sure. Well, first of all, thank you, David, for having me on the show.
Oh, it's been great.
Yeah, this has been fun. And
I'd like to spend another 2 hours or a whole day.
I want to take some notes. I wish I had a notepad here. But I hope people got a couple of tips they can deploy. So my final thought is, if you heard something that lands with you, just try it. I just invite people. Trying to be a great leader is usually the first indication of great leadership. We're not going to nail it, but our colleagues will see that we're trying for them. And that is the biggest deal of all. And then if people are interested in discovering more, the website is All In by Mike. That's my name, allinbymike.com. Free chapter downloads, of course, and resources for the book before you even decide to buy it or not.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. This has been a blast. Appreciate it.
It's been a joy. Thank you.